1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
There's the crack of the bat, and it is a call for a celebration. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
Charles, we are sitting on the same side of the table again.
Means we got a guess.
You look like you're friends.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So normally we're apart from each other, but when we're pulling a guess, we'll sit on the same side of the table. But again, like I said, it's cause for celebration, and we're coming up. People listen whenever, but we're heading into April, and we're very, very close to a very special day in April. Charles, what is that?
Champions Day.
Champions Day.
April 18th.
April 18th, and we are there's a big old celebration we're going to do. And we've been saying it over and over again that we're going to talk about the crest, the blazon that we made. That's on my hockey jersey and on the banners and stickers and buttons and everything. We were because you guys put a lot of time into making it. So today we're going to talk about a couple things. We're going to talk about what's coming up for Champions Day and our celebration this year, and we're going to break down how this. I love this
crest. You love it, and I love it too.
I love the crest.
But we got the man with us who created it.
And yep,
Chris Boerma.
Chris is with us.
And
Chris,
are we going to introduce our special guest sitting
and
at the table with
also
us?
with us to talk about just all things Detroit, Jer Staes from the Daily Detroit podcast.
It's good to see you, and I have to tell you that I'm a large fan of crests and heraldry.
You are.
When I saw your hockey jersey at the DIA, I was like, oh, there we go.
Well,
that's proper.
Well,
game on.
Our man Chris, who's joining us live via satellite, this is made to specific specifications. Like Chris knows what he's talking about when it comes to it, and when he was telling me about the different elements that were going into it, I was like, because I'm interested in it too. Like I have a book on Canadian heraldry and all that, and looking into it, but he's got it tattooed in his brain. Like he knows. Chris is the one that it was his idea to even do it in the first place.
Yeah. So Chris is a contributor and a fan of the show and a contributor. He's always helping us out with ideas and thoughts, and a massive help creating this amazing.
And this is also the man. I just wanted to give a quick shout out. Besides that, this is the man that even had the idea to put a Champions Day Wikipedia page out.
Oh yeah,
he built the entire framework for the Wikipedia page for Champions Day. And also, I contributed a lot of the writing for it, the information, of course. But Chris was the one that suggested it, and since that time, the Champions Day Wikipedia page has grown into a life of its own. It's like an entire book, and so this is the man that I'm eternally grateful to for doing that because it's amazing.
The way you guys are talking, I'm going to need a bigger camera to fit my bigger head in.
Yeah.
Good. Well, you deserve it, man. That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm glad to have you on here, because you have been a contributor and an important contributor in a lot of different ways. So we're glad to have you.
Happy to be here.
I want to hear about how you got into heraldry, but before we do that, Chris, tell me about your childhood.
Well, it all began back in 1971.
Yeah. But no, so how'd you get a background in the heraldry? How'd you get interested in this?
Really, it kind of came about because of Champions Day.
Okay.
Obviously everyone's seen coats of arms, and I found them kind of interesting to look at and stuff like that. But really, what kind of happened was I was thinking, wouldn't it be kind of cool to have a Lion supporter, a Tiger supporter, and then, incorporate the Red Wings in there somehow too.
Yeah.
And so I just really, I was an amateur at best at this, and just started kind of slapping some stuff together using different pictures and things like that I found online. And
but when you say supporter, what you're talking about, for people that are not familiar with the idea of crest and heraldry,
very specific terms for all.
There is very it's a really fascinating subject when you start diving into it and you start looking at the different terminology that goes. Like when a lot of people just say, this is the crest or the design or whatever, but but the actual the coat of arms,
the whole thing is a blazon.
The blazon, right? Yeah.
Blazon.
Coat of arms or armorial achievement is what the image is called, and then the blazon is the text version of it, basically the text description of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
All right.
So the supporters are the things that go around the centerpiece.
So the
Correct.
first piece here, it's because Chris sent some images to go along with the conversation here.
So the whole thing there, would be called the coat of arms or the Armorial Achievement.
All right. So again, this is a lot of people watch this on Facebook or YouTube. And then a lot of people are listening to just an audio podcast. So this is a very visual version of the City of Champions today. So we're going to do what we can to describe things as well. So the coat of arms part is really like the shield usually, and there's usually sometimes like a helmet or some sort of something above it as well. So there's like usually like a shield with something on it and then some sort of adornment above it, right?
Right. And on top of the helmet, and again, heading way down the heraldry nerd area, is on top of the helm is what's called the crest.
All right.
And so if you ever get in with a bunch of heraldry nerds and you call the whole thing a crest, they will give you evil looks.
Right.
Because they it's just that part at the top. And if you went back into like the old medieval days, that would be what knights would actually have, that physically on top of their helm as they went into various like joust contests and things like that.
Right. So I because I have in my family, I always called it my family crest tattooed on my arm, but it's the whole coat of arms. It's the shield, the helmet. There's a blazing sword above the helmet.
Blazing sword? That's pretty sweet.
Yeah,
just show me your tat.
The blazing sword would probably be the crest.
Yes, and that is like that part of it is the crest above the helmet there, the blazing sword.
So when we were because I was going back and forth with him about the design, and there there was very specific details that we had to abide by in order to even begin putting it together. So that's what. So
the shield. The first part is the shield, right?
Right, and again, in nerd speak, that would be the escutcheon.
The escutcheon. And repeating. Something like that. I don't know.
So the big thing with heraldry is it's kind of a mix of Old French, Old English. So a lot of the terms will sound kind of semi-French, semi-English.
Right. Okay, and then from the shield, the next piece of it.
At the bottom there, that's the motto.
And then I don't know what it is in Latin on my family coat of arms. It's Latin, but it's I strove and I won.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's the Flanagan motto there. And so
it's better than like I tried, but it failed.
I'm gonna give it a shot.
Gave it a shot, but didn't do so great.
I'm gonna watch TV. How do you translate? I'm gonna watch TV into Latin.
We did our best.
So for the City of Champions crest, Ultimate Victoria. So what
the motto, not the crest.
The motto there as part of the crest. What did you put down there?
So ultimate.
That was actually Charles' idea on that. I had something different.
Ultimate victory.
I like this better.
Is that Latin for ultimate victory,
Heck
or is that just
okay?
Is that proper Latin
you speak Latin, bro? You read it right up to Ultima Victoria.
Ultimate Victoria.
Yeah.
All right.
Ultimate victory. Because how can you get any better than this? So this whole thing, the overall,
and it is the ultimate victory.
The whole concept is that this entire. Remind me how to say the entire thing. It's not coat of arms, right? It's the
coat of arms is fine.
Okay.
Technically, the coat of arms could be just the shield, but most people refer to the whole thing as a coat of arms.
So the whole coat of arms is basically the whole coat of arms is this 1935 season. That's what this is. That's what this is emblematic of. So every component of this, it's not necessarily. I mean, it's like this is specific, like a very specific thing to the City of Champions season,
and it is the ultimate set of victories.
And so the proclamation on the coat of arms is that there is no higher level of victory that a city can ever achieve beyond this Ultima Victoria. That's why to me it was the perfect fit, because it sends the signal right off the bat when you read it, like, okay, what's the ultimate victory? What could possibly be a better season than what happened in 35?
So now above the shield we have what is the crown is above the shield. Now is that is that the crest? The crown here, is that the crest for this coat of
again,
arms?
We're slightly deviating from true heraldry a little bit, which is perfectly fine because there isn't really, especially in the U.S., there isn't real heraldry that you have to stick to as far as rules or laws or anything like that.
Okay.
Normally, there would be above the shield, there would be the helm, and then above that would be the crest. In this case, we're kind of replacing the crest with a crown, as symbolizing that this season is the king of all sports seasons.
Well, there you go.
Yes,
all right, and so the crown sits on top of the shield. If people aren't,
the crown
can't
of victory.
see it.
Yeah, the crown of victory.
It's a 5-point crown. Is there a reason it's a 5-point crown, or is that?
Because 5 looks good.
Okay, fair enough.
That's right. Yeah, but that's right. Yeah.
And then on the crown, across the band of the crown, is 33 in Roman numerals.
33 championships, right?
For the 33 championships. And then there's a couple small on 3 of the points. There's 3 on the 3 middle points. There's 3 small. What's on there, Chris?
So again, this was a good idea from Charles here. We've got in the center there is a bald eagle, and that is flanked with a fleur-de-lis and a lion, which those represent the 3 countries that ruled over the area of Detroit.
Yeah, so Detroit, built in Detroit.
After European colonization, of course.
Okay, right on.
Which is kind of emblematic of the Detroit flag, which has got that built into it.
And we're going to get to the Daily Detroit and Jer's blazon coming up too, because there's some cool stuff in yours. Chris breaks it down in Latin for you, so we're going to look at that. So, and a lot of the Detroit imagery in its flag goes back to French. Leans to some of the nods to the French.
Well, yeah, and our multi-country history.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So after the crown, we have what we started talking about, the supporters, right? And that's where the 3 majors come in.
Right. You got obviously Lions, Tigers, and then behind them the Red Wings.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So we got the Tiger, Lion, and a Red. Yep, and the wings.
I love that. So there's a really cool lion and a tiger, and they're on their hind legs. And they're holding the shield up, which is very, very cool. And then there's widespread red wings behind them, which is very, very neat. So on the shield itself, we kind of skipped past what was on the shield. The shield is the actual blazon.
The shield tells the whole story, really.
And it is what is it, Chris? Tell us. I have the slide up for if people are watching the video, but what do we hear here?
Well, real quickly, the blazon is the word form of a coat of arms, and we have to remember this is coats of arms really became popular back during the medieval ages. It was used as a way for knights to distinguish themselves on a battlefield. And then it kind of grew from there to where every lord and lady and duke and baron and whomever wanted their own coat of arms. But we didn't have cell phones back then where you could just take a picture and text it to someone. So there had to be a way to communicate this relatively easily across great distances. And so there became a kind of semi-formal word way of describing a shield.
Okay.
And so for ours, it's azure, on a bend, argent, 4 mullets, the first sable, the remaining azure, and sinister chief of mullet of 30, argent pierced by a mullet, which seems a little incomprehensible, but, again, if you get...
What the hell did you just say, Chris?
Exactly. It's just a kind of a short, semi-poetic way of listing exactly what's going on.
Yeah, it's exactly the description of what that is.
So the azure is that referring to the blue?
Exactly.
Okay.
The main shield is blue, so you start with talking about what the base shield color is, which in this case is blue, and then we've got the bend. That's the white.
Didn't we do blue to represent the Detroit River right across from it?
Michigan in general.
Okay.
Michigan in general.
Yeah.
Blue's kind of the
That's
Michigan
right. That's how
color.
we set it up. That's right.
Right. And then you've got the bend, which is a diagonal line. In this case, it's white. And there really wasn't a whole lot of symbolism to white, other than the fact that white looks good, and you need what's referred to as a metal color. In this case, white or gold, to go on top of the color to distinguish it.
Right.
And then you've got 4 mullets across the bend there, and the three blue mullets.
You mean the stars?
Stars.
Yep.
So
Right.
mullet is another name for a star?
Correct.
Okay, in heraldry and coat of arms language, mullet is another name for the stars going across there. Okay.
Exactly. Yep. And you've got the three blue ones there. Those are for the three team achievements.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Tigers,
we
Lions,
have
Red
the
Wings.
one that's
Yep.
sable. That's colored black, and that one stands for Joe Louis. It's different color to recognize the fact that Joe Louis was a major part of all of this, but he had to do more than just be a sports figure.
Joe Louis was not a champion in
someone who's
1935. So the 3 stars for the major sports titles. In the fourth black star is for Joe Louis, who was not champion but is recognized as a major part of the season, because
recognize that it was more than just being a sports figure. That he had to deal with more than just being really good at a sport. He had to deal with all the races.
Sure. And then the last mullet on there, the last star, is kind of unique.
Has 30 points around it.
It's a 30-point star to represent the other 30.
For each of the other champions of the season. And then the center star there is kind of to represent the fans from Detroit and from Michigan.
Oh, nice. And then there it all comes together. If someone's watching, or just go to the website, or it's on our feed, on our podcast feed. It's the logo there on our feed. Charles, I changed our feed logo to be
sweet.
by the way. All right. So, but like I said, we got Jer here from the Daily Detroit.
So just mention too, we sell that in sticker format and all this other stuff.
Available at wearingfunny.com.
So it's a nice little advertisement for our stickers.
It is.
Get that merch.
It is.
So this episode is dedicated to selling merchandise.
But the
merchandise is really just a byproduct of it. We didn't do this just for the merchandise concept. We did it because we felt like it needed to be done.
And I fell in love with it. I was like,
Jamie
holy
rocks
crap,
it.
this is the coolest thing on the planet.
Jamie rocks it.
Well, and the hockey jersey is the perfect format for it.
Right.
Of all the different ways you could do
really
it. When you think about different sports uniforms, it's the hockey jersey that gives it the room and the space to do. Like, it wouldn't work as well on baseball or whatever.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I mean, a baseball jersey would have to be small on one side. A football jersey, there's no room because they have the big numbers on the front.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I almost blew the whole thing with this hockey jersey. Because in my fraternity, my number was 27. So it's like my number. That's the number I always use for everything. And I was building this jersey, and I was like, what number am I going to put in? I was like, and I set it up with 27 on it. And then I was like, oh, holy crap. It's got to be 30. It's got to be 35.
Yeah.
But when I first laid it out, I had 27 on it just because that's just what the number I always use. And then I was like, oh my God, no, that's so got to be 35. This was this close to being with a 27 on it just because it's my favorite number. But yeah, so it's like, on the back it says Detroit 35 really big, and it's got the 35 on the sleeves.
Jamie rocks the hell out of that jersey.
Yeah, I love that. I love this.
I do
love
too.
this jersey. So it's available at but then the t-shirt, there's t-shirts available at wearingfunny.com. But all right, but Jer, Daily Detroit, the Daily Detroit logo is very, very snazzy, very, very cool, very regal in and of itself. And
that is cool.
Chris, you kind of broke this down for us. So break down the Daily Detroit logo for us, Chris.
Well, I was looking at this with the front thing, and I was like, you know what? That's a coat of arms too, and we can blazon that as well. So again, the back is the blue, so we start out azure, between a bordure argent, and that's the white border around it, and then we have a fesse in bowed goals. With that would be the red stripe across the front that's bent up a little bit, and prim-rated argent. We got a lion poisson argent, and that would be the red line in the front, and the white borders above and below the red line. We got in chief 13 mullets argent arranged in 2 lines, 6 and 7. In base, a fleur de lis argent.
There you are.
Nice, man.
So, Jer, have you ever heard it described like that?
That is the fanciest description. I love heraldry. I like shields and all those kind of things.
Yeah.
But when we created this, we didn't have such an official person.
Yeah, that's what's awesome
with us.
I'm glad it fits into the model. I mean, it fits into the it has a proper it's better. What I'm trying to say is at least it wasn't like Chris is going. I can't interpret it because it's like a it's like a cartoon or something. It doesn't fit into the logo. It's an actual legit coat of arms.
So, Jer, the 13 mullets, besides all your high school and grade school photos, the 13 mullets, the 13 stars on here.
No, it's only because our show is business in the front and party in the back. That's why.
There you go. That makes total sense.
So with 13 stars, what do the 13 stars represent?
So it kind of ties into all three things. So the 13 stars represent the United States because the 13 original colonies. Sure. It is a shorthand way to do it. Right. You could go 13, you could go 3. I didn't like the balance of the 3. Mm-hmm. Some go 1. I didn't like the balance of the 1. So 13 ends up kind of filling out the field very well, as well as having a root meaning in the 13 colonies.
Sure, okay.
That's cool. So you helped design that one, did you?
Yeah. Good. So cool. I worked together with a longtime designer friend of mine, city resident Mashara Walker, who's done a ton of great stuff for, I've worked with her over the years on things. And, it's inspired by the 250th anniversary iconography for the city of Detroit. So when that came through, you would go down Woodward and you would see stars, you would see lions, you would see fleurs, all the way down Woodward in rotating order on triangle pennants.
Oh, nice. Okay.
For that big anniversary.
Right.
And there is a kind of like a more 50s distorted version that kind of hung over City Hall that was it was different for sure.
Yeah.
But it was something that was kind of inspired by. It had a lot of that one had a lot of beavers and stuff all over it and all this other. It doesn't quite work for the
in the burning city
like it was just the whole because the one thing about the city of Detroit, and I've learned to love our flag and things like that.
Yeah.
But like our iconography is detailed, to say the least. Like the original city flag was somebody literally hand drew it on paper and then they copied it and then cleaned it up.
Really? And barely cleaned it up.
Right. It was literally like a citizen who did it. There was no, there was no clean lines or anything like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's
maybe
great.
they're like, we'll clean it up later on. And
we'll get to that.
We're good.
We're committed.
It's like,
well, and I want this to represent the region too. So the shield isn't a pure version of this, but it is very reminiscent of our freeway signs because in a lot of ways our freeways are part of what connects us.
Sure.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So
very
cool.
reminiscent. And that's come to represent. I
signs.
see your guys see the page all over the place, and that's always like the logo that. Like I see that representing your page. I mean, it's come to be a visual symbol of your page. I see it all the time.
So the Daily Detroit you guys are found wherever fine podcasts are sold, just everywhere.
Only the finest podcast.
Yes. So you guys are everywhere. You would want to be. So find just Daily Detroit, and you'll find it. And so the Daily Detroit every day, bringing people what exactly?
What to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan.
There you are.
So it's a mix of interviews, panel discussions, things like that, whether it is the best places that you want to go out to, the places you want to connect to in our region. Metro Detroit has everything every other region in the country has, but you got to know where it is.
Right.
And sometimes you got to drive to it or something like that. So we help connect people to know those things. And then from a more civic-minded perspective, it's a deeper dive into the news. It's more analysis.
Well, you hit some hard news here and there, too.
For sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot of fun features, and then there's some hard news in there as well.
Well, I think that's important. If you're going to do a well-rounded show, you have to do something where you touch those different issues.
Yeah.
I think it's important to be engaged in your civic life. And I think in Metro Detroit, it's very important. Wherever you live, whether you live in the city, you live in a suburb city, whatever, those kind of things are important. And we're not going to be able to go forward as a region without knowing these things and sharing these ideas and having a platform for it.
So the Daily Detroit is also very connected to sports in specifically DCFC. You guys
more shields.
You guys more shields with the DCFC. You guys cover a lot of the Detroit City Football Club. You cover all of their home games.
And if we had the
meets-
budget, I'm sure we'd send somebody
Yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah.
We actually sent somebody to Memphis for the playoffs last year.
very connected to the team, and I just love what DCFC did with the stadium down there, and what's happening in Hamtramck with the baseball diamond over there. There's so many great things happening, honoring the history of Detroit and keeping it alive with new and fresh sports happening in them, and then honoring what's happening, with the Negro League fields that are getting revamped. And I think this year is really going to kick them off. They're really going to start doing a lot of stuff in them this year.
They had a huge kickoff event for that field, and it is such a special place in Detroit history in Hamtramck.
The renovation of that field, like I know the guys, they used to do the Tiger Stadium. They used to do the old Tiger Stadium grounds crew that moved to there after the PAL took over the Tiger Stadium group, site. But the work that stadium in Hamtramck, that baseball stadium, is like literally night and day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that stadium was literally it was so over. I mean, it was just a stadium completely overgrown. Like nature was reclaiming it. I mean, it was literally nature had reclaimed that stadium, and now it's an actual ball field again. I mean, it's a legit ball field with a legit grandstand, and it is ready for baseball.
Well, and one of the beautiful things about areas of Detroit like that one is that when you stand on that field, and I went on there, a little bit after they were done or whatever, because when you go cover the games or whatever, you're right there, right? And it's all accessible to the public. Mm-hmm. And you just have this moment, especially for me as a baseball fan, like you stand out there and you realize all the greats, like Satchel Paige, like all these greats that were on that field at one time. It gave me the same feeling of when I went on Tiger Stadium's field.
Same thing. I've been there too. Like because that Naven Field grounds crew, who now is the what do they call themselves over at that Hamtramck field? I don't know, the grounds crew there, but they used to be called the Naven Field grounds crew, and so we played softball on that field one year for Champions Day, for like this Champions Day event. The event was playing softball on the grounds of Tiger Stadium, and I know what I'm saying is I know what you're talking about, because it was like, dude, I'm playing softball where Ty Cobb and them used to play baseball, right? It was nuts. And my friend who was with me, Kevin, his name is Kevin Bush, we were walking out to the stadium, and he told me, he said, bet the first round of drinks that I don't make an out all day. And I was like, deal, right? Deal. And he did not make an out the entire day. He was the MVP of the game. I mean, it was crazy. He was like possessed by the baseball furies or something. I was like, dude, you're in the zone of like on Tiger Stadium grounds. So I know what you're talking about. There's it's almost like, the history, like it's in Detroit, the history, it's almost like how they describe the Force in Star Wars, man. They're like, it surrounds us, it penetrates us, it's here. Like in Detroit, it's like the history here is just so pronounced that you can't help but feel it on a site like that.
People think about the buildings, and of course the buildings are great. And Keyworth has a ton of great stories in itself, being a works progress administration building. FDR spoke there, all that other stuff. But when it comes to that history, it is empowered by all the people that pass through it.
Yeah.
And that's really, to me, what I sense is the magic and the power of all the different people that have passed through over that time. And that's part of the magic of being in the city core and those kind of things. Not that there aren't areas around the region that have that. You go to Wyandotte, that's a very old suburb. Wyandotte, I believe, was originally a stopover point for the fur traders on the way to Detroit, because I guess a day's canoe row will get you there, right? Yeah. But and so there are definitely historic areas, but Detroit, with so much of it being built kind of new within the last 60, 70 years, there are certain areas of the region, and especially the city, where you're like, oh, this is a thing. And there are people here, there are stories here. Where I live, I actually live within dog walking distance of the childhood home of the Inside the Actors Studio guy.
Who's that? Charlie Rose?
No, not Charlie Rose.
Oh.
My brain is...
Jamie will look it up. We got it. Don't worry about it. Jamie's got the internet on.
And I love that show, right? But there's something special about reading the book and being like, oh, that was the place that they went to. And he was down the street right from there. Like, there is something to that. And there's all kinds of different people that are part of that.
James Lipton.
James Lipton, that's right. That's why I'm like, it's not Jamie Oliver. That's nowhere near it. Like some James. We'll just declare it you, James Flanagan. But there is something about that is part of the draw about it. When people say, well, why Detroit, or why this or why that? they don't understand that there's like an energy to it.
Yeah. So, Jer, what did you know? Because the whole precipice for the City of Champions podcast was the trilogy of books that Charles wrote. And I met Charles at an art fair, and he was selling his books, and he gave me the elevator pitch, and he was so excited talking about the story, and I'm like. And podcasts weren't quite a thing at the time. I mean, this was a bunch of years
You mean you
ago.
were live before podcasts?
I know.
As was I.
And
me too.
So I know, and then but he was pitching me this story. I'm like, this guy should be on the radio. He should tell this story to people. I should get him on the radio with me, or whatever. And it just always in the back of my brain. And then podcasts, and we get more involved in creating some podcasts. And I'm like, you know what, I'm going to call that dude who wrote those books. And I want to hear those stories because I love the city. I love history. And I want to honor those things, and that's So Charles is telling me the stories, and we're digging a little deeper into them, because when it comes to it just print, it's you're limited with space, and so we can really
you're
just
limited by people that want to read through 1,000 pages,
right, and we can kind of swim around in this a little bit and have some fun with it. So, but Jer, what do you know about the City of Champions story? Is there a part of it that you enjoy?
Well, I think one of the reasons why it resonates with so many Detroiters of the time, having, talked about, because I'm actually one of the few who actually knew the City of Champions story, a while ago, because it's something that if you look into Detroit history, it's one of the things that you know. One of the reasons I think it resonated with people at the time and became legendary. Did you know that in 1935, the unemployment rate in the city of Detroit was 40%?
Whoa, okay.
It's the highest in the Great Depression.
Yeah, it was the middle. Like the banks had just failed.
Speaking, the auto industry completely collapsed. We were the worst. Statistically speaking, Detroit was the hardest hit city in the Great Depression.
Well, and part of that was, and I just did an episode on this recently, we were the center of the biggest bank failure.
Yeah.
The Guardian
I didn't know
building.
that.
When you look at the Guardian building, that was built out of Silicon Valley-like largesse.
Right.
The Silicon Valley is the Detroit of now.
Yeah.
Right? Because back in those days, you would have engineers and all these folks bringing their engine into the hotel, like over drinks, and be like, here's my V4, like V6, right? Like looking at all these different things. It was the same thing. The apps of that day were heaters,
right,
or front wheel drive, or things like that. And all those innovations were happening here, much like Silicon Valley. So when people say, Detroit needs to be like Silicon Valley. Oh, no. It goes the other way around.
That's the thing. We need to be our own Silicon Valley again. But Detroit just needs to be Detroit again.
Exactly. I mean, that's the whole thing. Like, we should cut our path, because what makes things attractive, if you try to just copy everything everyone else does, it's not remarkable. Be yourself.
100% agree.
And there's
organic. Keep it organic. That's the thing. Yeah.
And I'll argue to the death that Detroit shapes society.
For sure.
I mean, Detroit, Windsor, you CKLW and the people that left there started MTV, and it's like, you're welcome. World, or
Radio.
we apologize, World, one of the two.
Well, when it comes to cars, you're going to have different debates with that, right?
Yeah.
But there's no doubt when it comes to media.
Yeah.
So you think about the Lone Ranger, the Green Hornet, all the things that happened out of the Maccabees building.
Oh my God.
You think about the original radio stations that happened here that were tied with the
first coast-to-coast NFL game was in 1934, that first Thanksgiving game, and it's still played today. The Lions are still on Thanksgiving Day every day because that's where it all started.
Yeah,
34.
It's crazy to see that. And if you think about the context of Detroit in that time, you wheel things back. Detroit was almost, it's rough, of course, because it's middle of the decade, right? 1935.
Yeah.
But Detroit was 1 million more people within the city limits in 1935 than it is today.
Yeah.
So if you think about the streets and all the things happening and all of that, not to say that it was perfect, but if you think about just the number of people, that is a force in the nation that had grown from 300,000 people in 1900. Like, think about that. 300,000 to 1.6 million in half a lifetime.
Yeah.
And that's what, those kind of things are possible and do happen. If you look at other places around the country, you're seeing growth in places like that. So I know that Detroit and Metro Detroit can do these sorts of things. It's, do we think that we can do it, right?
No, and one of the things that sort of compels me, I moved to Detroit. I live in Midtown Detroit, and I moved there because that was my belief as I'm like, dude, Detroit's coming back. Like, I want to be there. That's what, I moved there 10 years ago. And along the way, I was in Port Huron, and I was talking to this train engineer, and this guy is like straight out of like what you would think a prototypical like old man train engineer guy looks like, with like the hat, the baseball cap with the striped baseball hat, like and I was asking about the Michigan Central. And I said, what? I go, why is that not used? Like, I go, is it, because it was a shell when I talked to him, and he's like, I'm like, what? Like, I go, why, what? Because this guy knew everything about trains, everything. And I'm like, and I said, what, could that thing ever make a comeback? He was like, oh, absolutely. I said, well, what would it take? And he's like, it would just take people wanting to use it again. Like, need it, for it to be a cog in something that Detroiters need to use again, I'm like, so like, and actually he's saying like, if it had a if people wanted to use it and it was a need, then it would become, usable again. Of course, now it's going to be used for what is it, GM or
Ford's mobility campus. It's the future of what Ford is trying to do. And that's very exciting. It's a signature place that I think is important to attracting the kind of talent that those kind of companies need, and there's always a tension between, older and newer residents. And there's a lot of equity issues that very possibly for another podcast. But when it comes to what's happening at Michigan Central, it's truly transformational. It's something where my dad took me on the last days before it closed. We took a train. We did a weekend trip
that's
from
awesome,
in like in the mid 80s, late 80s. Right before it closed, was like a few weeks before it closed. And he's like, "We need to take this trip. We're going to spend the weekend in Ann Arbor, and then we're going to come back on the train because I want you to experience what this is, because I don't know what's going to happen to this."
Yeah.
And his assumption, and he's gone now, but his assumption was that it wouldn't make it, right? Because if you look at 1987, 1988 Detroit, it's a very different story than what the story is of today, where you've got those shoots of, you've got more shoots of progress and things. Not to say that there weren't people in the city the whole time holding it down.
Yeah.
That the work that happens today is really built on what they did. You see successful neighborhoods, and they're all built around areas where you had core people who stayed there and really held it out and made Detroit. And so I think it's important to always acknowledge those who stayed and made it through.
Sure. But the idea that I enjoyed, that I liked about what he said, was the idea of that these buildings can make it, the possibility of the comeback, but that their reuse is determined by the fact that people just need to use them for a functional purpose again. And it's sort of a call back to the idea of the organic development of like Detroit, like doesn't have to necessarily, it doesn't, not to copy anything that other cities are doing or to try to force a square peg into a round hole, but to, in essence, just to let it like, any type of a renaissance, to let it groundswell and become whatever that is. That's like allow it to be an organic comeback, an organic evolution of whatever sort of industry or combination of industries drive that comeback. Let it happen. Don't stifle it and just allow it to be.
Yeah, take the best ideas that other places have and then and then take them in to make them truly Detroity, if you will, because there are a lot of things that we can learn from other places, but we should make them our own, and also open up the doors so that entrepreneurs and everything and small business owners. And when I say entrepreneurs, I don't mean just like tech guys, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about people, Detroit is built and always has been built on doing jobs that are important, and sometimes doing jobs that nobody wants to do. Some of the people that I know make the most money do the jobs no one wants to do, right? Yeah. They're cleaning restaurant ducts. They're doing stuff like that.
Electricians and plumbers and stuff, like people that those like your blue collar type stuff. They make, that's there's a lot of need for a lot of that stuff too.
Right. And manufacturing's even changed too. Like, yes, there's manufacturing, but it's also, you're dealing with robotics, you're dealing with all these kinds of things, like technology, all these things like weave together.
Sure.
So I got a current example of how Detroit's kind of leading and shaping things, and it goes to is Motown music, and my friends over at Dan over at Melodies and Memories, he's a nut for vinyl, right? And he found a really rare 45, and he ended up selling it to Jack White, right? So he found the Frank Wilson, Do I Love You? Indeed I Do, right? And so it's like this super rare 45 from Motown. And the Frank Wilson story is very interesting. He was more of a writer and a producer, and he had this one hit, and then, but it never went anywhere, right? And so, but this track is great, right? And so Dan finds this, Jack White buys this, and there's not many of them out there, and then Third Man Record represses it, right? So tomorrow night, Springsteen's in town, and he just released an album, and one of the main songs on that is a cover of this, Indeed I Do, I Love You. And that wouldn't have happened if Dan here in Detroit, Nine and Gratiot, found this 45, and then Jack White, took it and bought it. He's got it on display there over at Third Man Records. Have you seen that?
Yeah. And I like visiting Third Man Records. Yeah, it's definitely.
And so it's shaped that whole thing. And then tomorrow, people are pouring $10 million into Little Caesars Arena to go see the 7-year-old fart play. I'm one of those idiots that's playing. I paid more for my concert ticket tomorrow than I did for my first and second car.
I'm glad you say you're one of those idiots.
I was waiting with the record story to know if there was going to be the Detroit City of Champions podcast record merch.
Oh yeah.
Right, do the custom pressing. Right, I was waiting for the merch.
We
pitch.
don't mention any of that on the show unless we can make a buck off it.
But I just that's another way that we're still influencing. So it's a Motown sound and things. But this new discovery, and it's just I argue that Detroit influences and will always be a major influence nationally, globally.
Well, one of the guests I had on recently was Dan Charnas, who did a book about Jay Dilla. And all of the beats that Jay Dilla did, if you listen to anything in modern music, Jay Dilla had his hands in so many things. You can just look it up online and see.
Very underrated.
Very underrated. But that power came right out of Detroit. And you end up these things in New York and Chicago, all these other places. It's the sound of Detroit that powers America's headphones, in my mind.
Yeah. So, but getting back to the sports, and celebrating everything that happened in 1935, because come April 18th of 1936, the president, who the heck was president at the time?
Roosevelt
was president at the time, along with the 48 governors.
48 governors from all 48,
all the current 48 states, each individually signed the plaque recognizing and honoring.
Yeah, did you see the plaque that we put up there? There's the plaque. When the story of the plaque is fascinating. There's this huge wooden plate. You have a picture of it you can show up? No. It's a huge wooden plaque that after the teams had all won, nobody knows who commissioned it, who paid for the plaque, but there was a company in Grand Rapids that made this mahogany, huge, like 5-foot tall wooden plaque, and in the top it says, "A nation appreciative of the achievements of Detroit in this year, Detroit richly merits the title City of Champions." And then what they did was they sent these little wooden tabs to all the governors across the country and Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
And they all signed
the tabs and then affixed them on the plaque. And now that plaque, when I was writing the books, especially the first book, I'd never heard of anything like this. But when I at one point I was doing an event for the Historical Museum. They did, what's the Christmas events they do? Anyways, I was talking. There's 100 people, whatever, and a lady at the museum, Tracy Irwin, heard me. She's like, "I hear you talking about City of Champions this, City of Champions that," and there's this plaque in our archives that it says City of Champions on it. We haven't really ever known what it's about, really. And I was like, well, let's get it out, and it was almost like Indiana Jones and
it's like in a box
Ark
in the
of the Covenant. It's
like,
in this
what?
box, and so she brings it out. I met up with her a couple days later, and they had it on a table, kind of like this. And I'm like, holy cow, man! Like, this is a plaque celebrating the City of Champions season. And then it's, it says the text in the top, and it's like literally the top tab is Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yeah,
and all these,
great.
I'm like, this is amazing. And so we took a picture of it. She ended up putting it in the museum as a feature piece.
Yeah.
I took a picture of it, and then I put it on my website. And then I get a call from a guy who was the one who had discovered it. And the story he had to tell is one of the most, I wrote a screenplay for a movie for all this, and I incorporate the story of this plaque into the story of the movie, because what had happened was, the story he told me was that in 1982 he was at a flea market in Armada, and he just got there in the morning, and there was all these people taking the tarps off their tables and that plaque was on a table at a flea market in Armada, and the tag was so wet from the dew that he couldn't even tell how much it was. And so he asked the lady, and she's like, "Oh, my husband got that out of an old school when they were demolishing the school." She's like, "I'm just trying to get rid of it." She's like, "If you take it off my hands, I'll give it to you for $30.
Wow.
So this guy acquired this plaque for $30. His name was Bill Aikens. And he got this plaque for $30, and he had it restored because it was all like waterlogged. And so he got it restored, and then he turned it over to his friend. And his friend donated it to the Detroit Historical Museum, and then it basically sat in a box from 1982 until I saw it in 2012. And then I found a photo on eBay, which was a photo of when they were dedicating, when the plaque was up the
Cherry Queen
Cherry Festival and the Traverse City Cherry Festival, and it had like all like the representatives from all the teams. It had dedicating the plaque or whatever. And then, like, I don't know what school it went to or where it, the sort of the trail runs cold after where it went after the Traverse City Cherry Festival. So there's a gap in between, like when they dedicated it at the Cherry Festival, and then to the point where
it was just in a school that was going to be demolished at some point.
To where it was found at the flea market. And so in between, like, nobody really knows where it, its travels in between.
But now it's a centerpiece at the Detroit Historical Museum, celebrating the City of Champions, which coming up, we're going to be there on the weekend before Champions Day.
Sunday the 16th,
This year, Champions Day falls on a Tuesday, so we're going to be there on Sunday the 16th to celebrate Champions Day. And they're going to have some special talks by some amazing people. Oh, wait, that's Charles.
Yeah.
There'll be some other presentations going on. They're giving away some Charles books. And there'll be some there. Charles will autograph them. Yeah. I'll be there saying snarky things.
As you do.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
And so we'll be there. But we're going to be there to celebrate Champions Day. And Mayor Bing brought it back. It was kind of, again, that plaque was lost. The story was lost. There's not many people that you knew the story because you came across it. Not many people know the story. I tell people all the time, they're like, what? And it's amazing that they don't know. And so that's the reason why we celebrate it. Mayor Bing brought it back in as a city celebration in 2012. Right before.
Well, he signed the document to bring it back. It doesn't necessarily mean that it ever has come back.
Yeah, and it hasn't really come back.
It hasn't come back at all.
Full earnest.
It hasn't come back at all. They don't mention it for any anniversaries. The 75th anniversary came and went without a mention. Any time there's ever. No, I'm being. No,
He's
I'm
passionate about it.
Well,
I can tell.
I'm being honest about it because what you're talking about here is, we've made the case in the show, and I'll make the case in 30 seconds if it needs to be. But that this is the greatest season to ever take place in the history of American sports. And I can take that to even one step further and say it's the greatest recorded story in the history of the world. I mean, you find another year by any city ever that won 33 championships in a single season, max championship level with it impossible to have any higher achievement in the realm of sports. And so we have this in our history. And before 1935, you have Detroit as a baseball town that had never won a World Series. After 1935, we've done something that no city has ever done. We have a whole new identity in the realm of sports. In essence, this is the birth of Detroit sports, the birth of one of our major.
We couldn't keep a football team.
Well, it's the root
before
of
this.
The root of it.
It's the root of Detroit being the best sports town in America.
That's what I'm trying to say. This is the story of how Detroit became a great sports town, at least as with regards to our identity as one of the great sports towns in the country. And yet, there's the conversation, like usually, I understand history. People are like, oh, well, you're just really into the story. That's why you want to talk about it here and there.
Yeah.
But the thing about it is that whenever there's some kind of a milestone event or something that there's cause or reason to even mention it, that's how the story is, brought back into the present and carried on into the future. And in every single time that there's a reason for mentioning it, it's never mentioned. Yeah. It's never discussed. It's not even mentioned.
You watch the Super Bowl or the big sporting events, or when the Tide Lions were like in vying for the playoff, and they mentioned they went back to, they never get back to the actual story.
No, they never do. They'll talk about the Lions having the first Thanksgiving game, whatever, but they never talk about that was the first Lions season ever.
Yeah.
They'll never talk about the fact that Lions team.
They miss the story. They glance it,
yeah,
but
the very next year,
that
same Lions team won their first NFL championship, and that it was in the same year as the Tigers and Red Wings first championship as well. Like, that's just an easy.
How do you walk away from that stat?
Yeah, that's what
How do you know?
And sometimes people don't necessarily know these stats, right? 'Cause
Well, that's what I'm saying.
They've got
Agreed.
people who prep that kind of stuff.
Agreed. But that ties into the larger issue with the story itself, which is really, you could say an issue, but you could say one of the most perplexing components of this is the lack of tradition, the lack of just widespread, just acknowledge, knowledge that this story even happened at all. In essence, a forgotten story of the greatest season in the history of American sports,
and that's why we're doing
has
the
been
podcast.
Forgotten. And
that's why we do. That's why we do the show.
That's what's so insane to me, because once you dive into it, me and Jamie have made an entire show. We're on episode 90,
91 here,
91 of this show, and we're still going strong with many topics to cover.
Many more stories to go.
Once you the thing that's so fascinating about it is that there's the overall fact of it happening. There's the championships for the first championships for each major team, the rise of Joe Louis, the 33 championships, the greatest sports celebration ever at the Masonic Temple in Detroit, the plaque signed by Franklin, all these things is the cursory overall view. But once you get past the aerial summary of it all, and you start to dive into actually what happened, who the people were that made it happen, what the obstacles were that these teams had to overcome, what the city was going through at the time. Once you start actually penetrating into that inner layer of it, what you find is not just the greatest achievement in the history of sports. You find one of the most fascinating stories, regardless of sports. I didn't go to college for sports history. This story sucked me in, right? And it's the deeper you get into seeing what what happened, who these people were, what the obstacles were that they ever overcome. Look at Jamie. He's been sucked in.
I know nothing about
He's wearing the
sports.
jersey. He's wearing the jersey. Look at Chris.
And I love this.
Chris, Chris has been rolling with us since 2012. Anybody once you get past just the cursory overall, the achievements are incredible. But once you dive in and you see that the Tigers were on their last leg. The Tigers were beat when Mickey Cochran came into Detroit at the beginning of 34.
Didn't Hank Greenberg not even play in the World Series because he was out, right?
He was in 35, but Hank Greenberg himself is he's just one component of one of the most fascinating components. In 1933, Hank Greenberg was a rookie just trying to make the team. He didn't even play half the year. The Tigers had signed a free agent star that Greenberg was a guy off the bench, and he told the owner to trade him because he wasn't getting any playing time. Greenberg played more baseball on Belle Isle on the Sandlots than he did for the Tigers in 1933. In 34, when he came on a team, when he first started, when he became a star in 34, when Mickey Cochran came over. Mickey Cochran came from the Philadelphia A's. The owner of the Tigers was on his last leg. Everybody, the media was furious with the Tigers. They're like, this is a dreadful team. Frank Navin is basically using the team to make money, and he has no money, and the Tigers are doing terrible, so they have no money for anything. And they're like, he needs to sell the team to somebody that's going to do something with them. They're a dreadful their attendance in 1933 was as bad as it had been, has not been as bad as since in 1907. They had no attendance. The team was dreadful. The Bucky Ayers was running the team into the ground. And so they're like, Frank had a heart attack. The owner had a heart attack. And they're like, Frank, you need to sell the team, for God's sake. Sell the team. And so and this is one of the most incredible things, rather than sell the team, Frank Navin borrowed money from his business partner Walter Briggs, and went out and got the greatest catcher in the game, Mickey Cochran. Double down. Takes a gamble, the biggest gamble of his life, and brings him in. And Mickey Cochran in spring training, they asked Mickey a milquetoast question of, "Hey Mickey, how you think the Tigers are going to do this year?" In 1934 spring training, two different newspaper sources both say the same thing. Mickey Cochran says, "We're going to the World Series. We're going to the World Series. When he says that, these newspaper reporters are like, we can't print that. What are you talking about? The team is the same team as it's been. You're the only addition. You got Goose Goslin, but Goose Goslin's an over-the-hill right fielder who the Senators just cast him off. You got nobody. You're the same team. And Mickey Cochran, and this is the defining moment of the entire City of Champions of everything that came after, was Mickey Cochran saying, you know what?
It's like Babe pointing to the fence.
Yeah. He says to them, you know what your problem is? He's like, you don't know how to win. You don't know how to. He's like, when I was with the A's, he said we used to circle the calendar and look forward to playing the Tigers every single year because you don't know how to get up off the mat. It begins with believing you can do it.
Yep.
I believe in this team. I know who I am. He's like, I am a winner. And he's like, and we are going to win.
Yep.
Okay. And he's like, it begins with believing you can do it. And I have the quotes in my books for every single Tiger player acknowledging that it was all Mickey Cochran. And it was this, when they went into spring training that year in 34, these guys are either too young or too old. But Mickey Cochran was like, we're going to the playoff. We're going to the World Series. We're going to do this. And they all said it was Mickey himself that came through and said that they started believing in it. They started believing that they could do it. He said when they came out of, El Knocker said, when they came out of, El Knocker was a rookie in 34. He said when they came out of spring training, before the season even started, they believed that they could beat anybody in the world. They came into the Yankees and they started beating. They beat the Yankees. They started beating everybody. They came out of the gate in 34 and just started romping through people. People were like, "Holy crap, dude!" The Tiger fans at 34 were like, this team is legit. Greenberg came out of nowhere. Greenberg came out, and that was his first year. Greenberg's first full season as a Tiger. This guy is just romping through the year,
and
just
that is
crushing
why
homers.
We are celebrating it coming up on the 16th.
But you see what I'm saying? Like that message that
if you believe you can, or if you believe you can't, you are right.
There you go, exactly. But that concept with Mickey Cochran, that's what begins it all. And I think that message is one of back to what I was saying about there's the cursory overall view of like the accomplishments, right? But when you start to dive into what they tapped into, what these stories were, the idea that Mickey Cochran could come into this city that he'd never been into before. He's already a star for the A's. He's already been to 3 World Series, 1, 2. He's already had an MVP under his belt. Mickey Cochran was a star at that time.
And it's interesting.
And he comes
these
into
stories.
Detroit to a team that's a bunch of losers, and he's like, it all begins with believing you can do it. And it was Mickey himself. Once the Tigers started to bring that success, the Tigers in 34 rolled to victory after victory. And guess what? The NFL, they saw an opportunity. They say, hey, we've been trying to get an NFL team to Detroit. We've tried and failed 3 times.
Yep.
There's this great team in Portsmouth, Ohio that's about to fold. Let's transplant them to Detroit, rename them something to associate with the Tigers. Like, I don't know, like the Lions.
Yep.
Bring them to Detroit. If they're a great team on the field, if they can be a great team on the field in Detroit, they can attach themselves onto the Tigers. We can take advantage of this renaissance of enthusiasm. So directly from the result of the Tigers playing so fantastic, as a result of Cochran driving that energy forward, the Lions got into the city. And then you see what I'm saying? Like this, we could keep on going with the dominoes all the way down the road.
But we're gonna party all of this at the Historical Museum coming up on the 16th.
But what I'm saying is to finish up the line of thought that I had, which is this. This is the line of thought that I have. That lesson speaks volumes could speak volumes to us today. The idea of believing in yourself, believing that, this a renaissance in Detroit, like that idea, like it begins with the belief that we can do it and we will do it. And that's, like I say, that message, once it requires the deeper dive into the story besides just the aerial cursory view.
Yeah.
And that's one of the, that's one of the reasons why we fight so hard, because there's so much to learn from the greatest season to ever take place in the history of America.
It's the Renaissance we need, not the concrete monolith we have.
Yeah. I think what I'm saying is that I believe in the Renaissance of Detroit. I moved to Detroit. I'm not from Detroit. I'm from Kalamazoo. I moved to Detroit for that reason. I moved here, and I believe that Detroit, is potentially entering a renaissance. I moved here for it. And I think that this could be a contributing piece to that story, to the next level, that the idea of the Detroit rising from the ashes I think that there's a lot to that the story
And all
can
those
speak for.
rising from the ashes stories are covered every day on the Daily Detroit with Jer Staes.
I don't have a merch store.
DailyDetroit.com.
Yes, dailydetroit.com.
DailyDetroit.com.
And, of course, Daily Detroit, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine or not so fine podcasts are found.
Yes. So, but yeah, and Chris, thanks so much for hanging out while we ranted and raved over here and had fun.
I always love a good Charles rant.
And then all the information about and the hard work on the crest. I
do have one quick story I want to tell, just because I promised my daughter I'd mention it.
Fair enough.
But Charles, you influenced my daughter, because I got into heraldry because of Champions Day, and because I got into heraldry, I started learning graphic programs. My daughter picked up on that, who is actually an artist much more skilled than I am, and she ended up deciding, based on that, hey, maybe I can make a career out of that. And she's studying to be a graphic designer right now.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's awesome.
That's
That is
music to my
awesome.
ears,
I love it.
Chris, man. I appreciate that, man.
Yeah, Chris. But yeah, Chris, thanks for all the work and all the things you contribute to the show, and really appreciate you spending time with us. Jer, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
DailyDetroit.com, and again, the just all the stories happening now, the hard news, the fun news, and everything in between. Little DCFC. Charles, we're going to have some fun over at the Historical Museum. Jer, you going to come out on the 16th, Sunday? We'll be down there and doing a formal presentation from 2 to 3, and then the rest of the day just kind of hanging out with refreshments is what I'm told.
Yeah.
Ooh, refreshments.
I heard refreshments. So
if I am not refreshed, I'm going to, ask for a refund.
Yeah.
all right. So Detroit City of Champions, the podcast, available it's just everywhere. Look it up. Do all those podcast things in all the podcast places. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.